I'm not afraid of like I think.
It depends where. It varies.
Right.
It's going to be
There's a
very
lot of
extensive.
different
Yeah. Like when you go to Acapulco. The combination works.
As a classmate in a social Spain. I think very, I think you for some reason. For that, the early travel does.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us for this afternoon session on green transition and business development for European SMEs in West China. And good afternoon, good morning to also all the participants who are joining us online. And just for everybody's information, we also have a live streaming of the session. My name is Liam Jam, the operations manager of the EU SME Center, who is, together with the European Chamber of Commerce in China, the host of this afternoon's session. First of all, allow me to give a little introduction about today's topic, but also, first of all, about ourselves, about the EU SME Center in China. The EU SME Center is an EU initiative that provides a comprehensive range of hands-on support services to European SMEs, getting them ready to do business in China. Our team of experts provides advice and support in mainly 4 areas, including business development, legal advices, standards and conformity, as well as HR advices. Collaborating with also external experts worldwide, the EU SME Center converts valuable knowledge and experience into practical business roles, as well as services that are easily accessible online. About the topic we are going to discuss today, I would also, before that, introduce the policy environment report for SMEs that the USME Center, together with the European Chamber of Commerce, has published in this year. In recent years, the policy environment for small and medium-sized enterprises in China has undergone a significant transformation. The EU SME Center recently released this SME policy environment report in order to provide an overview of the most significant developments affecting SMEs operating in China, in the country. SMEs constitute an overwhelming majority of the enterprises in China and are key to its economic development. Around 50% of the nation's tax revenue and 60% of China's GDP income comes from SMEs. And they're also responsible for 70% of technology innovation, 80% of urban employment in China. And European SMEs operating in China has also been playing their part in contributing to the above mentioned indicators. However, European SMEs continue to encounter difficulties while conducting businesses in China, according to this year's European Chamber's Business Confidence Survey. The most significant of these challenges includes information and support networks, access to financing, administrative and financial burdens, talent acquisition and retention, shortages of key technologies and skills, just to name a few. As can be expected, a major challenge for SMEs in 2020 was the impacts of the COVID-19 outbreak. The subsequent lockdown and travel restrictions, SMEs, comparing to larger enterprises, were particularly hit hard by the pandemic. And due to their nature, they usually have less financial resources, heavily reliant on steady businesses, and therefore were vulnerable to the disruption of business networks, supply chains, as well as human resources. As the scale of the outbreak became clear in early 2020, the Chinese government also issued approximately 600 policies aimed at reducing the financial and administrative challenges facing SMEs, including tax relief, postponement of loan repayments, cuts in rents, insurance costs, while this has also brought some relief to SMEs. The China Association for SMEs, SME Development Index data from the second quarter of 2021 also show that figures are still not back to the levels of 2019, which indicates the sector needs further support. And looking to the future, it will also be important that the 14th five-year plan for SME development and accompanying regulations include commitments to improve the business environment for smaller enterprises and to support SME development in the context of strengthening China's middle-income population. And to access, having had all the introduction about this policy environment report, to access the full report, as you can see on the screen, please scan this QR code. And it's open access for all SMEs and stakeholders of the USME Center, as well as all the members of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. And coming back to the context of today's meeting, China has vowed to reach carbon emissions peak by 2030 and become carbon neutral before 2060, while the European Green Deal seeks to achieve climate neutrality across Europe by 2050. On this context, SMEs play a crucial role, given their contribution to global economic activity, social well-being, as well as environmental footprint. The SME Center, together with the European Chamber, are very pleased, therefore, to invite everyone for today's discussion, which is also as a sub-forum of this year's EU-China Business Technology Cooperation Fair. And the following topics will be covered in this meeting, including, first of all, what is the overall policy and business development for European SMEs operating in China, particularly in the West China region, and what is the role of SMEs in enabling green and inclusive growth? What approaches can SMEs take to go green through the product, services, as well as business practices? Allow me to, before I hand over the microphone, to introduce today's wonderful lineup of speakers and panelists. To start with, we will have Professor Gu Lin, the Deputy Director of the Research Academy Chengdu of the University of International Business and Economics. After Professor Gu's speech, we will have a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Ali Sheikh, the board member of European Chamber Southwest China chapter, joined by three wonderful panelists, including Mr. Fulvio Bartolucci, the managing director and co-founder of Aiden Energy, Ms. Raquel Ramirez, founder and CEO of RR Consulting. Last but not least, Mr. Paul Sipes, the general manager of Proton Products, as well as the vice chairman of European Chamber Southwest China chapter. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Ms. Gu, Professor Gu Lin. Professor Gu, the floor is yours. Thank you.
女士们、先生们，大家下午好。今天呢，跟大家汇报的是中国西部中小企业经营的总体政策与营商环境。当前呢，世界经济面基本良好，主要的经济体保持增长。当世界运行面临
world economy is very good, and the economy is increasing, but we have the barrier of the trade, and we have facing the challenges of monetary policies, and we also have ongoing hot topics like terrorism and earthquakes, natural disasters. Facing all these challenges, we have to say that we need international cooperation to solve this problem. And China is safeguarding the multilateralism. China-Euro trade and economic cooperation enjoy a long history. It serves as the foundation for the comprehensive development. Recent years, China-EU trade and economic and trade is strengthening their ties, and the SME is very active with the initiation of the China-EU railway. We have to talk. There are a lot of potential for economic cooperation. First, I want to talk about the double carbon development policy. Currently, the global economy is working towards the digitalization and the green. Double carbon target is the responsibility and commitment of China, and Chinese government promised that made the pledge that they will reach the a carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, and to ensure the comprehensive green transformation of the economic and social development. Currently, the Ecological Environment Department has issued a guidance on strengthening the high energy consumption, high emission construction project. The management of it, and with the publication of some measures in Sichuan, Chongqing, Yunnan, Tibet, a lot of regions in southwest China declared that they will proceed with the project related to carbon peak and the carbon neutral. And in the 14th five-year plan of Sichuan, and we declare that we will reduce the energy consumption and carbon emission, and increase the forest coverage rate, and to strengthen and stabilize the supply of the grain. To realize the double carbon target needs our effort as well as the international cooperation. European Green Deal actually seek the carbon neutrality in the whole Europe, and against such backdrop, the SME play even more important role in the green transformation. Trade is an important propeller for the improvement of competitiveness of enterprises. Long-termly, SME lack the channel and resources currently against the backdrop of pandemic. China also upheld the policy of introducing in and going out, and so is the attitude towards the EU, the European SME. In Chengdu, we take Chengdu as a starting point, and under the guidance of development policies, we would like to ensure the technological exchange and the investment cooperation between Sino-China SME. And second is business environment. First, the geographical strength of Chengdu. To strengthen the openness is a very clear direction, and under this change, under the circumstances of the changes in the 100 years, the Western China is a very good choice. Chengdu as the central city in West China It has a lot of infrastructure facilities, including free trade zone and international hub, international railway hub, and logistic center, and also reflecting the economic cluster of East China and West China. And with the BRI construction and the strategy of China EU Plus, it has strengthened the function of Chengdu as a hub, and it has substantially increased Chengdu's position as a hub and the intersection in the openness of the whole country. The Chengdu Europe Express Railway has initiated a golden path for the trade and economic cooperation. And in Chengdu and Western China, we have one city, two airports, and the European Center. That's where we are now, has provided a good venue for European enterprises to come to China and to settle. It has established a Sino-China Economic Exchange Foundation and the basement. Except that the custom in Chengdu has also promulgated the measures to strengthen the openness of Chengdu, from supporting the open platform to increase the capacity. We have continuously optimized the environment of the border control and actively support the bonded area and development, and to ensuring the coordinated development of different authorities. And we have raised altogether 26 concrete measures to encourage international friends to come to Chengdu. Custom in Chengdu, in terms of the measures in a lot of aspects, is actually providing very good business environment for the European enterprises who come to Chengdu. Business environment is very important name card of a city, and it is also a core competitiveness. Chengdu has, for consecutive 2 years, awarded the prize of China's International Business Environment Demonstrative City. According to the feedback from the conference related to the business environment, Chengdu, there are 15 index, and Chengdu has ranked top. Currently, Chengdu is continuously optimized the policy and the measures, walking into the business environment 4.0. Software with hardware environment is what Chengdu provides for the Europe SME. The CPC Sichuan Party Committee raised that we have to adhere to the systematic consumption and to promote the projects and the work on the target of the carbon peak and carbon neutrality, so as to promote the transformation of the region. And this has already become a consensus. The first China Digital Carbon Neutrality Summit held in a timely manner, which provides a very good explanation for the digitalization and double carbon's relation. And we're exploring and actively practicing the philosophy of green water and mountains is the golden mountain. We adopt a very positive attitude to Chengdu is taking a very active position in promoting the green and the low carbon development, and will adhere to the principle of carbon to cut the emission and to contain the carbon dioxide emission and restructuring of the energy mix and the industrial structure in order to combat the climate change. And I would also like to introduce to you about the University of International Business Economic Research Academy Chengdu. We serve as a bridge for the exchange between China and foreign countries. We are also an important platform for the relations between the enterprises of China and Europe. We have for multiple times introduced the technology enterprises of Europe to Chengdu. We're always at the frontier and looking with a forward-looking view. And in the Clean Energy Center, drawing upon our academia resources and also the international platform, we set the double carbon development research as the main content and providing consultancy and training related to the double carbon. These 2 days we have a Humboldt forum in Beijing, and we will also have a sub-forum in Chengdu. We will discuss the complex international economic and political order in a post-pandemic era. We'll explore how to promote the low carbon economy in a post-pandemic era. SME is a very important drive for the regional economic development. We provide a very good platform for SMEs development in Chengdu and creating a very good condition for the SMEs from Europe, China, Europe trade relations and has a long way to go. And we will create a beautiful chapter for the development. And Mid-Autumn Day is also approaching. I wish you all happy festival. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gulin, for your sharing, for your insights, not just from an academical point of view, but also from policy point of view on your interpretation on how SMEs in China, especially those businesses in Chengdu, are responding to national development policies such as the 14th Five-Year Plan, as well as your introduction on how the business environment in Chengdu and the potential of consumer markets could potentially provide opportunities for European SMEs for entering the market. Without further ado, I would like to already connect to the next part where we're going to invite businesses from Europe, as well as policy experts from a Chamber of Commerce, as well as sector experts in the relative fields to come to the stage for our panel discussion. And I will handle also the microphone to our moderator of this section, Mr. Ali Sheikh. And I kindly ask the supporting staff to help us with the setup.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome on stage Liam, as we know. Raquel from RR Consultancy. Paul Sives from Proton. Liam from the EU SME Centre. And Fulvio from Aiden. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ali. I'll be the moderator for this panel, and we'll be talking about green transition and business environment for Europe from European companies. As a brief introduction, I'm a chartered accountant and general manager for Vista. I specialize in business consultancy, and right now I focus on outbound investment. I've been joined by an esteemed panel who will share their knowledge and provide their insights. Now, before we go into the panel discussion, I would just like to share my own personal candid view on the policies. What I've noticed is a lot of these policies can seem very grandeur, suitable for large companies. Quite often, SMEs can find it challenging and difficult to apply. SMEs have fewer resources and arguably undertake more effort to undergo the process of becoming more sustainable. So why is it important for SMEs to pay attention to green transition and undergo the effort to become more sustainable? Well, actually, SMEs can benefit from improved business performance, better profits, better public image, and enhanced efficiency. We'll look at these challenges faced by SMEs, and we'll implement sustainable procedures. First of all, let's ask Fulvio. Fulvio, let's start by gaining an understanding of SMEs let's start with gaining an understanding of SME challenges in actually transitioning into becoming more green. From various policies, including the 14th Five-Year Plan, China has emphasized the value of carbon neutrality because it contributes to long-term sustainable development. We know SMEs don't have as many resources as multinationals or SOEs. What approaches can they take in order to become more sustainable?
Thanks. It's a very broad it's a very broad area. I think mainly because when we talk about SMEs, in fact, there is a huge variety. In fact, you have very small those which are on the edge of being pocket multinational. So there's a very large variety, so what I think one good approach will be to try and start a little bit on the things that define to some extent an SMEs, and see basically how they can be turned around and become how could become approach to sustainability. Some of the the key features of being an SME as opposed to be a very large company. So for example, SMEs, they tend to have very short to some extent chain of commands. So they have normally ownership, which is partially also the management. That and when it comes to sustainability, that is always like every of these feature can be a limiting factor or an opportunity. So when it comes to the short chain of command or ownership manager, so that what it means is that they would have potentially a much easier time in the moment that they decide to
make decisions,
to not to make decisions, but to change the strategic approach. Okay. And some of the business approaches as to include or to embed sustainability inside the overall overarching strategy and the operations of the company. When we are I worked in very large corporation. I worked for Solvay, Rhodia in the past, and changes is slow because there's a lot of inertia in that. When in a smaller organization, it's relatively easier to, when the owner manager takes the decision to change a lot of the processes, the way that the company operates. So that is actually gives a speed from the top to down, which is generally not allowed to larger organizations.
Is there an approach to understand the full process, like when you're trying to do sustainability? I mean, you can look from the beginning or the end of an entire process. What sort of approach would you recommend when you're looking at analyzing the whole company or sustainability?
See, I generally, I work on energy, right? So I think one point that for generally, very, very often for SMEs, one large pain point, which is a very easy entry point, is generally looking at how professionally it is managed, the energy. And that is normally, you find very fast and very short-term solutions which can reduce significantly like the consumptions and at the same time save money. So that generally it's a very easy entry point which can motivate the owners / managers because it's there is always the point the double sort. Okay, to which extent we can engage in sustainability? Is it costly? Is it not? So normally starting from efficiency, it's always a good starting point, but especially because it's a key pain point. And the reason is because it connects to another characteristics of SMEs is that you have an organization that is normally not as large and is structured as very big companies, which means that you have people which very often they get to multitask, so they need to cover several areas, so they cannot have that same level of professionalism on everything. I mean, it's just human, right? So it means that it's inevitable that you have some part of the energy that you won't be able to focus, but there will be some very easy, low-hanging fruit to improve from moment one.
Right.
And that means that once you give that idea, okay, we invest a little bit on efficiency because we reduce the consumption, but brings a benefit on the bottom line. That is not really completely a structure. It doesn't mean, okay, from that moment you're heading into having a complete change into sustainability. But once you give a bite to the apple and you start having the initial effect, which is also within a shorter time frame, which is also the time frame which normally SME play with. Is around, you have benefit within 1-2 years, sometimes less than 3 for sure. So those kind of energy efficiency are a fast return, so they engage you. And but that engagement needs to be followed up because it's normally a first step, so to start the process, but it's not enough because it just improves your bottom line, but it doesn't really go one step beyond.
You mentioned it's a really good starting point to get the low-hanging fruit, but from the companies that you've looked at, is there any particular area across all industries where, like, for example, something is overlooked? Like, for example, it could be the logistics is overlooked. Is there anything from your experience that generally companies don't consider, but actually it's very important?
Once again, I think for me, there's the view that I had. Logistics, it's always, especially for SMEs, is normally kind of on a third party. It's not really, it's not very much managed in-house. So, but that I think it's a good point. Is that sometimes SMEs they have their own vendors. They are a vendor of someone, so they are very much into the chain of supply of larger companies. But they themselves are vendor, and I think that is actually, I think it comes out. It's good. It's a very good point. So taking a look at the impact of their own vendors, it could be a very cheap way to improve the indirect impact, which are always more and more accounted for by their supply chain. So it's not only yours, but the impact of your vendors. So that is one that you can create in a short time, a very efficient way to manage and select your own vendor in those which have a more innovative, more sustainable approach to the services to use, be it logistics or more.
For a lot of the companies who do manufacturing, it's very easy to kind of calculate the carbon emission or something. Anyone who has an output, what advice could you give industries that are in the services, for example? Like, is there any thoughts you could share on how service companies can reduce their carbon emission?
In a way, the group that I work for, Aiden, is a service company. And I think for us, the approach that we took has been, in a way, we dare in a way to use a little bit more of digital solutions for a lot of our processes.
Yeah.
Which they have a lot of direct and indirect impact in terms of carbon, and sometimes it's simply, it may even free one part of your organization to focus more on creating those processes that we're talking about in terms of we're looking at being more at the efficiency as opposed to be bogged down on some on working on hands-on on the process in a way. So that is it's not a straightforward way, but in fact is taking absorbing more digital solutions. It's really a way to direct and indirect address your consumption and in your indirect emission, because most of the services in the end will be sort of indirect. So it will be through your own vendors or through the access that you give to your client to other ideas. So, and the other thing, one other point is actually to innovate in the area that we can. So that is actually offering solutions which are somehow innovative, that makes it easier for a client to be green. So it's about what business proposal. So in our case, obviously I'm working on energy, and we know that it's complex for some SMEs to do the work by themselves. Actually, to create a solution which makes it easier to outsource, but in a very price tiered way, so that basically outsource
because innovation can cost money.
So for SMEs, because outsourcing could be expensive, but when it's done professionally, it actually should reduce cost and increase the efficiency. So that is actually the big contribution that we are actually aiming to do on the energy efficiency side. But that means, again, on our side, to try and build scale and efficiency through digital solution. So then in the end, the cost to a single user can actually be lower than their current one.
Agreed. So green transition can actually be considered an investment. It can reduce your costs. It can reduce your risks and ultimately improve your resilience. However, in a post-pandemic era, many SMEs have been focusing on surviving, with many companies facing challenges in highly competitive markets. This could push sustainability transitions down the priority list, which is inevitable if you're going to survival mode. Paul, what issues are SMEs facing in the post-pandemic era, and what type of government support is ongoing?
Thank you, Ali. Yes, the pandemic was a shock to everybody, of course. I've been running my business in Chengdu for the company's it's 20 years old, and of course we never faced such a severe challenge as we did during the pandemic. I have to say, however, that the government support was pretty good. So when we came out of the initial lockdown phase at the beginning of 2020, once I got the company back up and running again, and I've heard this from many other companies as well, the government put in place fairly quickly a financial support mechanism, which was initially for companies that were renting from government facilities, reduction or cancellation entirely of rent for up to 6 months, as well as the Social Security Social Security payments for staff was paid back to the companies. So that's a significant support mechanism. That lasted until the end of last year. So for a company like my own company, it was a great benefit because our goods shipments went down, and that helped us to keep going. It helped us to keep the salaries paid and so on. Fortunately for my own business, and I know there are a number of businesses in manufacturing that are located in Southwest China, they've grown after the initial difficulties that we had. China came out of the pandemic first, ahead of all the rest of the world. Located here in Southwest China is a good place to be because Southwest China is growing beyond the rest of China. So we were able to come out quickly and recover quickly and actually grow faster than we ever anticipated. But we're a manufacturing company, and I know other manufacturing companies in a similar position. There are other companies located here which are not so fortunate. Those in the service industry, which were looking after clients that were coming in from abroad, businesses that were seeking relocation and support from SMEs run by foreign entities. Many people were unable to get back to China. They got stuck in Europe or in other countries and couldn't get back. And some people are still stuck with their families outside of China. I worry for those companies, the service companies, that relied on visits by foreign suppliers, by foreign entities that want to do business with Chinese companies, that want to do business with foreign companies located it, and they can't do it anymore. So I think this is a big issue that I hope the government here could take more action on to support these SMEs that relied on these the travel, which is now basically dried up. So yeah, that's depends what SME you mentioned, Javier, about different types of SMEs. Manufacturing, service area, quite different. Hotel industries, they're not SMEs, but they suffered heavily, and still, when we get these ups and downs of restrictions of travel that are happening even now, that affects businesses quite significantly.
So with the turbulence that happens, is it still possible to get financing for companies, or is that still one of the biggest challenges? Once you get financing, it can smooth over some of this turbulence and risk.
So financing has always been an issue. I mean, as I said, I've been here a long time, and we've tried to get financing from any one of the main banks in Chengdu. Even foreign banks are reluctant to support SMEs. We brought it up, and the European Chamber has brought this issue up in the past as well with the local government. And we've been told the government's quite happy to support businesses, SMEs, there's no issue with the government. The issue tends to be with the banks needing to acknowledge there is a certain amount of risk, but look at the operation of that company and say, this company looks like it's doing well, it's been doing well, and we can take that risk. Up until recently, the CEO of the company, the managing director of the company, was asked to take on board all that risk by the bank. So the bank would come in and offer a loan and say, you sign here and you give me your property as guarantee and I'll give you the loan. But that's not something that's it's certainly something we wouldn't expect in the West. And it is changing. So I'm very pleased that after a recent meeting last year, we were told by the Kaohsiung district government, go to a particular bank and they will look at your business and may be able to give you a loan. They actually did that, so we succeeded. The only thing that worries me is that the Kaohsiung district government offered at the time a rebate on the interest of 1.8%. When we went to get the loan and I said, well, okay, can we sign the deal with the government for the 1.8%? They said, oh no, that's a policy which you have to apply for when the loan has been paid back. Which I thought, what? Surprise. So this is an issue. You've got this opportunity to get the rebate, but there's no guarantee when you sign the actual loan. You have to wait and apply later. So these kinds of things for small companies can be quite difficult to manage because your cost that you had anticipated has suddenly gone up. And I think the government needs to take a better look at how they can support SMEs and understand that we don't have as much money as the big Fortune 500 companies, and we need a bit more support here.
Absolutely agree. Now, you're from the manufacturing industry sector, and Raquel, you're from the services sector. So what are the main challenges your SME has faced when operating in Western China?
Hi, thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you all to speak of SMEs and not only the challenges we face, but also perhaps strategies we can take on to overcome the challenges that we face. If I may, I'd first like to start talking about the importance of SMEs, because the other day I was quite surprised. I was reading how SMEs in China are actually the backbone of the private sector. Actually, I have some numbers here that would be quite surprising for you if you don't know this, but they contribute more than 50% of tax revenue. They contribute 60% of China's GDP, 70% of technology innovation, 80% of urban employment, and 90% of new jobs and firms. So it just escalates. And that, I think, really can give us a clear idea of the importance that SMEs have and the pivotal role they play in economy and in green economy. I also really enjoyed reading about this. It was a German writer, and he coined SMEs as the hidden champions. I don't know if you've heard that. And it refers to SMEs and the strong role and leadership they can definitely take on and impact as a link in the industrial chain, in boosting resilience, as you mentioned, and also in developing more high quality development in general. So I really wanted to start with that because as we talk about the challenges, we need to keep in mind why it's important to overcome these challenges. So if I may, as I gathered information, I had a chance to identify two prevailing groups of challenges that I'd like to speak to today. First, I'd like to talk about the first prevailing group of challenges that encompass strategic partnerships. And with that, many of the challenges for the SMEs are sort of things like recruitment, effectively understanding policies and procedures. Oftentimes, there's a language and cultural barrier for many, especially foreign SMEs, to understand the expectations and demands that they need to, follow through with. Also, oftentimes, infrastructure, something as simple as finding a space can also be, especially for small SMEs, very small SMEs, is an interesting and very important aspect that can be a challenge, right? Connections and business services. I'd like to talk about a specific case study of a company that I work with. It's called ITTC, and it's International Technology Transformation Center. And they, as an SME, identified early on that there's a huge demand for global technology innovation. So therefore, they've honed their energy in creating a channel to connect foreign and local technology. So that's the first part. The second part is I want to speak to the success they've had in receiving Chengdu municipal government support. It's been key to really empower them they dedicate themselves to giving straightforward solutions, and they've been able to really build online and offline a multi-factor collaboration network. And if you're an SME, you know that is key, to be able to have a network with both foreign and local technology-focused SMEs in order to grow. They also prioritize technology introduction as well as cooperation in green and environmental economies. And so this is the beginning of seeing a prioritization that is key for us to be able to advance that. Lastly, and more importantly, I'd like to mention them as a wonderful study case because they directly find strategic partners for other SMEs, as well as support SMEs in strategically positioning them in the market, especially the Chinese market, which, as you know, most of the time is challenging for foreign companies when it comes to context, environment, and cultural aspects of business, especially in Southwest China. Now, I mention this because I think it's really important to view it from all sides. So there's also, fortunately, been successes in receiving the support and then also being a hub to support. And having strategic relationships and partnerships are key to be able to succeed as a small and medium enterprise. May I mention the second one? Please. Thank you. So as I continue to try to find what strategic solutions we could bring to the table, and I also gathering information not only of my own experience, but of other SMEs, I realized that the second biggest challenge and group of challenges pertain to branding and transitioning to green. So in that, many of them find it very difficult to difference themselves from other companies who do similar things. They also struggle to get accessibility and visibility among local and foreign markets. And then lastly, navigating Chinese marketing channels. Every day it seems like a new one pops up. And I think it's really important to understand the challenges and the complexities that that represents for SMEs. I, with these challenges, want to point out the key role that women play and can play in both branding and green transitioning. Because women are powerful agents of change, as you may all know, and specifically for green transition and differentiation of your company. Empowering women economically actually propels growth and prosperity all across the board, no matter your industry. And it also reduces suffering on all fronts, including environmental. Women play a vital role in greening economies. In many countries, women already are embracing the greening economies and are engaging and so on, such as women farmers, such as women taking roles like forest stewardess, as natural resource managers, and entrepreneurs. Women are distinct multipliers of investments made in them. And this is because of their spending habits. So when women are invested in, their spending habits go way beyond their households. They not only impact their direct family, their children, their husband, perhaps their own parents and parents-in-laws and so on, but they also impact the well-being of their communities. And in this, women, it's important to remember, are consumers, producers, and workers. They encompass the entire supply chain. And in this, they play a very crucial role in benefiting green economies and also reaping the benefits that green economies give. Actually, Harvard Business Review, which is one of my favorite sources, they estimated that women are much more likely to buy recyclable. They're much more likely to actually invest and buy in eco-friendly labels and are much more conscientious in their buys in energy-efficient products. Therefore, women economic empowerment affects patterns of household spending, and they're much more likely to increase demand for sustainable products and services. So as you can see, they are leading a significant and can be leading a significant growth and impact on green growth and economy. Women are poised, they very much are, and research shows it, they are poised to propel green economy. And we often don't have these conversations and mention this very important, crucial role that women have. Women very much in the demand of professional training in green sectors that we need in order to further that agenda and sustainable business practices provide an untapped resource for green growth. Ultimately, we need to invest in women-owned businesses that use sustainable practices along the entire supply chain. We need to capitalize the opportunities to help women grow their businesses simultaneously, at the same time advancing green economic growth. If I may, I'd like to offer, just to have the most complete answer and bring to you your attention, additional action steps that overall encompass, I think, SMEs and how they may overcome challenges. In that, it's very important, as we all understand, to have an overarching view and support of the leadership in order to really drive not only the message, but the goals and the purpose for the different goals that we're going to establish. So in this case, it would be important that the leadership of every SME prioritizes women and green economy. And how can they do that? Having a clear commitment to global and green economy with an introduction and a very strong framework that's going to offer the possibility to promote sustainable patterns in the consumption and in the production, viewing it as a whole and not only the different aspects of it, correct? Setting up targeted incentives, right? So in order to have these very specific goals, we can also set up targeted incentives that's going to motivate not only the leadership, but everybody within the company. We have to create environments that are going to enable us to be able to achieve these goals. And really, finally, we as SMEs, we need to be proactive in cultivating connections. We need to be proactive in finding those strategic relationships or working with companies like ITTC to enable us to have more reach to other strategic partnerships that will help us be able to reach our goals. And lastly, really, it's important to keep the engagement of our stakeholders also sharing the same goals, and in this case, the green transition.
Thank you, Raquel. I know you're really passionate about educating, so I really hope that with this knowledge that you also take this forward into your academy as well.
I very much do, thank you.
So what we've heard from Paul and Raquel about both manufacturing and the services environment. It's quite clear that a lot of the change can come from businesses, not just government. What we have already seen from the Chengdu government, who've actually been progressing this since 2017, they've done a number of iterations, even demonstration zones. So it takes both the government and businesses to actually make change towards an ecological civilization. Liam.
Yes.
Could you please tell us a little bit more detail in the context of the EU Green Deal and China's pledge to become more carbon neutral? What are the business benefits and costs of going green for SMEs?
Sure, indeed. I have to be honest, I did not prepare a long narrative paragraph, but I actually joined this panel as a backup because one of our panelists dropped
Liam,
out
you're not
very last
backup.
minute.
You're not backup.
But I think I still have some interesting information. Thank you. To steer up the discussion a little bit because, and indeed, like a very good question, first of all, Ali, because I think that's indeed the logic of SME considering green transition, considering going green. If you look at what our function is as EU SME Center, we support SMEs entering the market by first of all raising the awareness. What is available on the market in China, which resources, and is there a market after all for your businesses? So first of all, for SMEs, I think it's a question for SMEs in Europe, I'm talking about, the first question they need to consider is that should they go green or not? And I talk about this supported by some statistics from last year's annual SME report. Only 37% of SMEs in Europe has implemented this sustainability plan. Considering how important SME contributes to the economy, considering how important SME green transition serve the bigger picture of economic transition in Europe, I think that's a relatively low percentage. The challenges also lies in that for SMEs, especially micro SMEs, who has even less resources comparing to medium-sized SMEs, is that, and of course, like Fulvio has introduced, the short-term economic benefits is definitely something they are carefully considering, and which is not largely available in all sectors. In the energy sector, the increase of energy efficiency could eventually possibly bring short-term economic incentives for SMEs, but not for all sectors at all. That's obviously one very big challenge, and of course, the financial support, accessing to finance, as also Paul has introduced, also contributes to these discussions. So that's, I think, a part of the problems or the challenges that SMEs are facing when considering going green. And then coming back to the market in China, because of the fact that we are here, we also work with SMEs who are already in the markets. Yesterday, I was able to share also at another panel about digitalization of SMEs, which I think contributes largely to the reduce of environmental impact, as well as
Improves efficiencies.
the sustainability of the SME themselves. The China market is not mature at all, and this remark I make by after collecting feedbacks from some of the very digitalized European SMEs who are operating on the China market. I can give examples of this. When it comes to procurements, procurement in China for European SMEs started with a lot of problems, which by now some of them has been tackled and some still remain challenging. When it comes to digitalization of SMEs, in many cases, the solutions provided are still based on the challenges of yesterday, which resulted, or which in a way shows the situation, indicates the situation that the procurers are still highly inadequate. That says more about the procurers than the procurement makers. As well, some other challenges that digitalization, for example, for SMEs are facing in China is again accessing to Chinese available fundings that many policies and many Chinese associations provide. There are platforms available, however, not largely still to all SMEs, especially in many very niche markets.
It's almost like you're touching upon the key points of all of our panelists. You find potentially maybe a strategic partner, you have the right investment, you're going to be able to create innovations that can effectively improve the operations of a business.
Yes, indeed, exactly that. And here the point I want to make is still again about the market. If you look, we're talking about highly developed, highly digitalized solutions that European SMEs are providing, which in many cases are also not necessarily demanded. Meaning that
are you encouraging more cooperation between Chinese companies and Europeans?
I think I'm not there yet, but here I want to point out this challenge is that in the China market, in many cases, the cheap bulk solutions are still preferred by the markets. So in a way, we also put a question mark: is digitalization or is going green actually worth it for companies considering the market in China? That's again, I think, something that will request further discussions, exchanges from starting from the government level, eventually to policymakers, and eventually also for businesses to exchange on such topics. I don't have a conclusion to draw here, so I throw it back to you, Eddie.
I just have a few more questions because if it's okay, even open up to the panel here.
Yes, please.
Now, Liam, you said that what you want to do is initially create awareness about going green. Raquel said SMEs is, forms the backbone of the economy. So what is actually stopping majority of the SMEs in accelerating this process? We know it's important. We know it's going to help improve business performance. There is some awareness, but I almost feel like the movement isn't fast enough. What do you think is happening?
That's also a question we want to figure out ourselves, because SME Center, we've been here for more than 10 years in China. We're still not visible for many SMEs in Europe.
Okay.
I don't know if Raquel, you want to.
Hi. Yeah, still on? Okay. The research is there, to be really honest with you. The United Nations and the different organs of the United Nations have done ample research. So I think that the evidence is there to show that it really is advantageous in the long run for humankind. And I know that sounds very romantic, but the reality is I think we're all feeling the changes in climate change and how it's truly impacting our world. We can see it in the news. And so what I mean by that is there are huge advantages. I understand that it may be costly at the beginning, but in the long run, they say that it is much more efficient in many aspects. So the research is there. I fully agree with you that awareness has to be the very beginning, right? In order to change people's mindsets, we need to drive them by self-awareness, by the awareness of understanding that it is and no longer questioning it. I think my frustration lies in that it's still questioned, whereas so much research has shown that it is pivotal. I would wonder, because we always mention these challenges, but really, how can we, find the funds, right? What are the pathways that people can follow? And language continues to be, in my experience and those of my colleagues, my partnering, SMEs, or not even, we're not partners, but we have a relationship, that language barrier. We have a lot of foreign companies coming to China that don't speak the language, that don't read, Hansa. So what is it? And these wonderful platforms may exist, but how do we, cross that, right? How do we unify these efforts?
I wanted to add a little bit of a view on, say, okay, why is this movement not fast enough?
Yeah.
And I think we really need to separate really two points. I would say you have an item which is on the external environment, external constraints. We talk finance, we talk a lot of even access to knowledge. There's a lot which is external environment, which is perceived as SMEs do not have an impact on, cannot influence enough. And then you have the internal environment, which could be structure, resources, organization, and even business strategy, the innovation and everything. I think you have these 2 points. And I would say when it comes to the external one, there is, despite there are a lot of organization out there, Chamber of Commerce, but I think a lot of the SMEs, they live in the perception that, okay, they don't have enough resources, first of all, time. So for them, it's like, I'm not going to put money and time into this because I don't have it. But that actually prevents them to have any role, any voice into influencing that environment. So that is, I think, point one, which is very significant. For example, I think the example of the financing was very important. It's something that every individual SMEs will go to a bank and the bank will say, what do you want here? But in fact, if you go if you build, as part of an organization, Chamber of Commerce or anything, that you have a different role. You have a voice that builds up. Same thing. It could even be applied into the women leadership. You through a partnership, you find more innovation. You find your voice. You build up what is difficult to build as one single SME. So that is when it comes to the outside. I think SMEs need to find to give up the concept, the mind frame that there's not enough resources to invest into partnership or to participate into organization, because that will be a key item to break through some of these barriers that seems not affectable by SMEs. Inside, I think that is more like, instead of a lot of mind frame, it could be women empowerment, it could be knowledge, but that has really a lot to do with the strategy. But I think what I have to say, and maybe is it's my own opinion, I think you either do it all the way or you don't do it.
Yeah.
Mine is that, like, if you want to go for sustainability as an SME, don't do the small steps, because you may as well not do it. You just go for the cheapest option, and it's okay. Maybe you'll find your niche through that, or it's your market. But if you start a process, then you better do it the full way. And by that I mean, just an example. You imagine, if you are a giant, Shunfeng, and you want to do on the recyclable packaging, then you are going to affect the whole of China.
Yeah.
If you are a small company which ships online, your environmental package is a nice idea, but it's not really going to, have a very big impact unless your entire structure, your entire offer is about sustainability. It's not only the packaging, but then what is inside and your raw material and the way you communicate has nothing to do with it.
There is an argument that you could start small initially and then build up as well.
But probably, and I am not an expert on that, my feeling is that if your idea is to start small, you will stay small and you will not build up. because I think actually the point is that you will not use maybe the only advantages that SMEs have, which is the flexibility. The flexibility even to challenge, to change the organization, I mean, there's less people, so you can engage the entire organization in thinking in a different way. That means that when you engage with your customer, when you engage with everyone will think, you know, in a different patterns. And that is something that a small organization can do much more easily. So when you will think everyone in your organization, once you engage them in thinking about sustainability, you know, can come out, can really, you know, flourish the innovation. Some ideas that, you know, the boss will not have. And it's not only about, you know, the typical things, the one recyclable packaging, but everything will be about, in a way, will be really much embedded into the offer and the process and the culture. So in that way, actually will transform much more the perception. And that way, I think, can become really an innovation and an advantage. But I think if you just, you know, start with the idea small, maybe it's a beginning, but very often, you know, you get into the, okay, I've done my thing, you know, I've done my green thing, and
it's
I'm
a token
okay.
gesture.
Yeah.
So what I can see is from these panelists, Liam, Paul, and Raquel, they represent their own respective communities. It would be very nice, as a moderator said, there could be more of a unified voice to promote green transition externally. And even with Raquel's education, for example, to embody green transitions from an internal corporation from the beginning, from inside.
I'd just like to jump in. I mean, the environmental aspect is something that SMEs or businesses that are dealing with the rest of the world have to come to terms with, because we have customers that are now demanding that our products are labeled with ROHS, or the company has, you know, ISO 1401, whatever it is. They're demanding, or they're suggesting, that if we don't have these compliances, they may not buy from us. The thing is that when you're a company like ours, and I'm sure many other SME manufacturers that are dealing with other companies in China, is that we may take on that role and say, okay, we must do this in order to supply our products to the right environmental standards. Then when we go to our sub-suppliers and we say, hey, guys, are you following any kind of standards? They look at us, is there a problem? Did we make something wrong? No. Have you got any standards? Look blank, because they don't understand the concept in many ways. We had an issue a couple of years ago when the pollution was very bad here in Chengdu, and the government cracked down, rightly so, on many companies that were infringing the law and not properly removing pollutants from the environment, paint sprayers and engineering workshops. And that was a big issue for us, because our sub-suppliers were shut down for a couple of months. And our sub-suppliers said, oh, it's okay. They'll forget about it soon. That's a big issue. I think in order to deal with it, we need to deal with it properly. The government needs to take hold of this. This is a great opportunity to get the message out there, this conference. Grab hold of it and live with it. They have goals they want to achieve by 2050, right? 2030 and 2050. The only way they're going to do that is by really cracking down on all the companies implementing standards that are out there. You said the standards are out there, right? Get them, implement them, work with them, all the way down to the smallest company. It's a tough job and it costs money, but it's the only way to do it.
There is internal, external. There is in terms of culture, external promotion, what we're doing today. All of these need to be consistent. We have this event today, which is great, but it needs to be consistently done, so it becomes a norm. It becomes part of the culture. Education and making people aware of this, it should come, without getting philosophical, it should come from within, and then it can be obviously enforced as well. Decarbonization and carbon neutrality are imperative for us to progress towards an ecological civilization, not only benefiting society and the planet as a whole, but also improving our own business performance. I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Use the microphone, please. Use the microphone, please. Use the microphone, please. Interpreter cannot hear the presentation from the speakers.
I think on one side, I could say that the feeling in certain way that is not that restrict the energy sector. I mean, it's not as much as it may have been some years ago. I mean, there are some areas which are more restricted, but we never came with the idea of compete with, Datang, Huaneng, those kind of energy giant. I think our target and the way that we work, it's mainly working, you would call it in energy field behind the meters, which basically means you work within other organizations. By within, I mean within a factory, within buildings. So actually the efficiency that we do and the energy that we, like investment that we do, it's about production or efficiency within factories. For example, within buildings, it's about optimizing the existing energy assets. So in this field, it's very much level. So it's, I think the difference just comes on in terms of, again, finance. Of course, SOEs, they have very easy access to finance, very cheap finance, much less so private companies, let alone big or small, or even Chinese or foreigner. In general, it's no financing for project of energy. And but when you work in this way, it's really more like the demand come from it based on the customer. So, or on the analysis, what is the energy needs and what are the opportunities? The idea is to connect to what I was saying before. A lot of enterprises, we fall within the SMEs, but actually could still have, quite relatively large factories in some cases, or even, services which manage buildings. They do not have generally a very professional eye on energy. So, but for very reasonable. I mean, they have a smaller organization. They cannot think about every single. They have a baseline, their key business, and they focus on that, and it's reasonable. But in fact, that means that there are lots of opportunities which to improve the efficiency at very simple level with a very fast returns, and that is actually what we focus on. And now with renewable is the same. We are like the party which maybe will make an investment for your green energy utility. And I say utility because it may be electricity, it may be heating, it may be cooling using geothermal, solar, or a renewable source. And this is relatively free. So it's by free mean there's no significant distinction between Chinese and non-Chinese parties. So.
I could also comment on to that. It's not commenting; it's more like also because it's on a similar topic. Also sharing my opinions. I think when we're talking about because SMEs in Europe are they respond in two different ways. One is integrating their own systems, their own solutions to the Chinese market, and the other one is answering the demand addressed by the markets. And I think that's completely different approach will also possibly results in completely different results. And the demands addressed by the market normally are responding also to then national policies being launched or a recently established regulatory framework. So my point here, I express myself in more simple ways. But I think from those two approaches, and I think from the statistics point of view, definitely those that are answering the demands of the markets has a better chance to score. I'll stop here.
Any more questions?
The questions to all the panelists. I would like to know what's the future of sustainability in China? That's a broad question.
Maybe this is a question for you, Fulva, because you've worked across China. Have you seen any particular trends Have you seen any particular trends across China that you think are going to be more prevalent in the Southwest region? Because you're based in Shanghai, their demands are different, their systems are different. So what do you see over here in Southwest China when it comes to trends and the future for green sustainability? Over here, are they focusing on any particular niche you've identified or anything that could spark your interest?
I'm thinking about it, but I think first idea, no, I don't. I've not seen anything, particularly different. I mean, there's a lot of difference in the way the energy is structured and consumed, but it all depends on natural resources. So it's not really a topic which would be on interest. But I think was something that I wanted to have my idea, and specifically for China. I think China, I think it's a little bit, going to the original point, but for me, it's very essential, even if it's not really about Southwest, sorry. But I think China is coming to be a very significant powerhouse in terms of consumption. I mean, a lot of world consumption of goods or trends connected to consumption are now, they have to take China into consideration from many points of view. And I think that is also one of the very significant area where we play the global game, because it's consumption is about raw materials, is about the energy which is used to produce those raw materials, and everything else. It's about even the fact that the concept, the culture of disposable object versus long-term objects. So there's a lot of things which runs around the idea of what are the consumption patterns. And I think very reasonably, China has been on a trend to increase it, to become a modern, wealthy society, to consume more and more. But I think we know as well that is going to the opposite way compared to sustainability. So I think the key trend for the future of sustainability is actually how much China and Chinese consumer, Chinese company, Chinese SMEs, European SMEs are able to actually to create an environment where the famous circular economy can be established, where actually
changing.
It's actually to embedding in a way like in the consumption patterns. What is the real value or the environmental weight and damages of a certain object. I think that it's for me is a need future step, and I can say that there are something that I start to see here in China, not necessarily in the West, but I think there are products, there are brands which are start to market around that, but it's just very much at the beginning. It's because the question I think was about the future of sustainability, And I do believe that without addressing that, and that will require, you know, government action, consumer action, innovation at SMEs. But without that, then we'll always be, you know, trying to, you know, to find the solutions for problems which are too big. You know, too much energy consumed, too much raw material which needs to come somewhere, too much waste to do something with. And sometimes we're just reaching problems which are bigger and bigger. So it's actually much better if we try and address at the bottom line.
That's a good question, and it's something that's been on my mind for a while, because we're a manufacturer, we export our products, and every now and again, as I said earlier, we get these requests from our customers. Are you compliant with these certain standards? And frankly, up to now, we're not compliant with many of these standards. We're not a big polluter, let's put it that way, but there are many areas that we could do something. And I guess I was mentioning to Ali when we came in here, actually, this conference has actually put something in my head, as well as the customers that are actually demanding it of us as well. We need to look at this, and it's something we have looked at in the past. But it's another thing that, for an SME, we're not a big global Fortune 500 company. We've got limited resources. My company just went through an audit the last 3 days with a UK audit company. It took 3 days of 4 people full-time just for the audit, let alone all of the support material that we spent months preparing. So when you're a small organization, to do an audit for environmental standards, it takes time, it takes commitment. As you were saying before, you need to, if you're going to do it properly. Don't just wash around the edges. But I think as an organization, we actually need to. So it is something I will be looking into. But is there an area that together as a USME Center and the government has achieved this 30 years, they've got to start somewhere, can they provide support?
Question. I, you know, what if we went on defense, started taxing emissions? Right? Both from customers, society, you know what I'm saying? So I think that international organizations that are regulating this and very much are championing this should be part of that solution in a big global scale. In a smaller scale, I got to thinking now that Paul was saying, you know, that some of his subcontractors were, you know, they stopped their businesses for a moment. What are the options? I started thinking, what are the options that exist? Because I often also wonder, you know, and if there are options, who's giving us the information as SMEs where they are and who, you know what I'm saying? So I think oftentimes we don't see all the options that exist, especially in the eco-friendly realm. I think that they do exist. I know Chengdu has many very capable startups and many parks that have, small SMEs that are very much, not only do they have the knowledge, but capable of steering bigger companies or just more poised companies towards becoming green economy, if I'm not wrong. So, how do we create those partnership relationships, right? Speaking to, what I said before, I think that that's really important. That's part of the awareness, not only the importance of it, but who exists that can support and complement you transitioning to green, right?
I think on this side for us, I have two main objectives, and one I know will take more than 1 year, and the other one could be more achievable. First one, it's I have been working in these years. I'm working right now to try and give to work in selected areas of China, of course, because now I think one item is connected to the questions before. Some parts of China are allowed to do more broad level of piloting than others. So depending on where is possible, where not. But what I would like to do is actually to give even not huge companies, but even like SMEs, even probably not the private, but at least the legal entity, the capacity to, in some areas, to purchase green energy without producing by themselves on the roof or somewhere else. I think that right now piloting exists of this sort of trading, but they are limited to very large consumers. But actually the market is been moving much faster than we expected before. So to give to even smaller companies, probably through, again, a partnership, because we'll need a scale to negotiate, but through a partnership, we give the opportunity to jointly purchase a certain amount of green energy as opposed to just purchase the typical, whatever is served by the grid. I think that is one product, in a way, objective that I have, to do that not only for very large consumer iron and steel, automotive, this kind, but even a smaller one through probably bulk purchasing. The second one is instead. Guys, I'm a technical guy, so I'm less. It's not very cool vision, but it's my job. It's about, we have some very interesting tools. Not only us, I think. In fact, companies, they have amazing tools which use right now easily machine learning, but not really high-level machine learning. It's just to optimize the consumptions in building like this one for the cooling, heating. You won't imagine how much waste comes into heating and cooling a building, just because it's a machine that goes by himself, has some set points, set time, and they just go on and do their work. And they could be very efficient machine, but there's a lot of waste nonetheless. So, but there are more and more capacity to control this based on the occupancy. If this room is empty, obviously we'll need less ventilation, less heating, or less cooling. There will be lots of easy ways to adapt that based on the external weather. So you have now very precise weather forecast. You can forecast how much will be the consumption and adapt. You can store part of it in ice or heat storage. So there are lots of interesting ways how you can control these things in a building. And we do it for very large buildings, for very large consumers. So I think one of the actual objectives that I have, that I'm working on, is to try and put this sort of service more in a cloud-based services, which means that instead of having all the cost of a lot of engineer coming here and installing sensor servers here to control the chiller, actually that can be done in a way much more easily with a very limited number of sensors, just controlling a few equipment, and that can become extremely cheap and bring the efficiency in that sort of like tiered way that we said before, as opposed to have all the the bulk fixed cost of having, which normally we do to make a very specific personalized in a way installation in a large consumer. In this case, by finding more using a cloud structure, cloud controls, we will be able actually to have only marginal cost for individual points, which will be able to optimize much smaller spaces, which in their heating or cooling networks.
Thank you very much for your attention. I know the carbon peak will happen at 2030 and carbon neutrality at 2060. I know that's a few decades away, but it doesn't mean we are relaxed about this, and we should continue and start this process as soon as possible. I'd like to thank the panel, Fulvio, Liam, Paul, and Raquel. So if we could give them a nice thanks with a round of applause.
Thank you very much for your attention, also for all our attendants online. If you are willing to further connect with all our panelists, as well as with us at the USME Center or European Chamber, you are very welcome to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.